Hello, and welcome back. I'll be attempting another electromagnet device today here on the Jasa channel. This will be my third electromagnet video in the series. It should be an improvement over my first one, but I haven't tested it yet, so we'll find out later in the video. And so I'm starting out here with the scalloped tubing for the battery compartment. I'm going to puff out a small bubble and rip it open in the flame. This will open a hole in the tubing and allow me to flame cut the tube in half without closing off both sides. And so now I'll just heat up a band around that section. I'll pull apart with the hole facing up and bend it open. It's kind of a quick way to open the tube, but it leaves the rim a little bit awkward, so I'm going to have to shape that. And so I'll be using the same type of metal core from the first video, but the improvement should come from the wiring. In the comment section, you recommended I try using magnet wire, which is simply copper wire with a very thin enamel coating to keep it from cross-conducting. It's also a much thinner wire, which should allow for more wraps around the metal core, which can be a good way to gauge how powerful the electromagnet will be. And so you may ask, what is the best size of wire to use? And the way I understand it, it might depend either on the size of the magnet you're trying to make or the power that is available. So for example, plucking the strings on an electric guitar will generate very little power for the magnetic pickup. And so by using an extra thin wire, like a 40 gauge, you'll be able to get more loops and ultimately run a longer length in a smaller space. But now if you're trying to power something like a hydroelectric dam on a river, that smaller 40 gauge wire would probably stretch half a mile and wrap around the core several thousand times. But I believe it would also heat up and burn through the wire very quickly, as it doesn't have that high capacity for power. So you would need a much thicker wire, a 10 or 12 gauge. Which, being a larger size, wouldn't allow for as many wraps and maybe run the length of only a couple hundred feet. And so it's kind of like a big water slide in an amusement park. The larger the tube would allow for more people, but it would also take up more space and make the ride a little shorter. And so I'll go ahead and put in the metallic core and then fill up the rest of the space with frit, which should make it a little bit easier to encase. I'm not going to fully melt the frit together. I'm just using it to displace the air, and then I'll seal the tube up at the top. Which, as I said before, you have to be a little bit careful with sealing up tubes. The air likes to expand and contract during the heating and cooling process. And so being a sealed vessel, I'll be avoiding the kiln on this project. And I've gotten a lot of questions on how to use the kiln. I did make a kiln operation video, which talks about why and when you want to use the kiln. I didn't really demonstrate the annealing process, which is normally done when you're finished with your work. You don't want to let your work cool off too quickly, but just enough so that it's below the annealing temperature. If it's still molten, it might slump or flatten out a little bit. But other than that, it's just one of those things you use the right information, but you might need to try it yourself to figure out exactly how it works. That's how I feel with a lot of interesting science phenomena. You just tend to pick up more information and observe it better in person than through text or a video. It's almost like trying to explain what music is without actually playing any music. And so in this case, we can't actually see the magnetic fields. We may be able to simulate them with some iron filings, but other than that, what if you could see them with your own eyes? I'd assume it'd be a more in-depth, more richer experience, like listening to music. And so I should have thickened up the end of this battery case. The wall is very thin. I'm having some difficulty getting a very firm connection there. And I think this will have to do. So the next step up would be to wire the magnet. I'd assume the quickest way to wind these would be to use an electric motor, like a drill. I also lost track of how many wraps or turns I've made on this electromagnet. All right, I'm going to put the batteries in because it's time to run the test. All right, look at that. It's working. I can't tell if it's more powerful than the first magnet wand, but it's definitely more functional. And so it's not strong enough for these iron filings. I'll have to use a powerful neodymium magnet to start moving them around. Wow, this is really weird. It kind of looks like a snake. I'm going to see if I can draw something here. And I shall call it the Iron Snake. And now I'm kind of spinning the magnet in circles here, and you can see the filings spinning also. As the magnetic field gets closer, the smaller particles begin to bind together. However, they still retain that spiky structure as they're following the orientation of the magnetic field. Essentially, the iron becomes a temporary magnet itself. Sort of like a lazy river with inner tubes all floating along the path. And here's the best shot I can get right here. It looks like the spikes are kind of waving back and forth as I rotate the magnet. That's going to do it for episode 89 on electromagnets. I want to thank you for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future projects here on the Matt Jasa channel.